There's a joke in our house about the Isaiah paper. When I was in graduate school, I spent a whole summer working on that paper. I just kept finding more interesting things about Isaiah until the dining room walls were wallpapered with my notes, and I still hadn't written the paper. I thought that might just happen with this sermon. There's so much information available about both the good and the bad things that are happening in our environment. What to share? How much time do we have? The Earth Day movement was begun in 1970 in response to an oil spill and the devastation it caused to wildlife and habitat. It raised our consciousness about the effects of industrialization, progress on our environment. And so annual Earth Day events began as protests, as ways to share scientific information, suggestions for habits that we might change, and political actions that we could take. But also as celebrations with songs and art, and festivities that remind us of the beauty and wonder of creation. Tikkun Olam is an ancient Jewish phrase calling us to repair the world. Now, I don't know about you, but I find myself exhausted and overwhelmed just thinking about the chaotic state of the world. Healing it or repairing it feels quite beyond me. But that's what I'd like us to think about this morning. Tikkun Olam, healing the world. Most especially with Earth Day coming up this week, my thoughts go to our Earth, to the climate, to creatures, to all of creation. With all that's happening in our world today, wars, hunger, disasters, disease, political unrest, refugees displaced seemingly on every continent, what is the environment but just one more thing to worry about? And how is it an issue for us as people of faith? In Psalm 8, the author considers the wonders and the order of creation, and especially that humans were created only slightly less than angels and set to care for this divine handiwork. Unfortunately, as we know, that responsibility has too often been abused with little regard to long-term consequences. At the most basic level, our call as people of faith is to love our neighbor. And that means neighbors of every kind, human and otherwise. The desire for the earth's resources, land, water, soil for crops, minerals for energy and the development of products, and creatures for food and labor. These are the building blocks of life, of community, of nations. They are what makes for wealth and power. And isn't that actually what the struggles are all about? But what can I do, we might ask? Well, we come from people who've lived through difficult times before. They did not solve all of the world's problems, but they learned how to live faithfully within them, how to act with justice and compassion without knowing the outcomes, and how to remain open-hearted when it would be easier to shut down. I read about the bamboo seed, that it can sit on the ground for 4 years with no visible change. And then on the 5th year, it can shoot up 90 feet in just a few months. But the miracle isn't the sudden height. The miracle is that for 4 years, an intricate network of roots is growing beneath the soil. And so we are called to be people of the roots. We live in a moment that feels like a wounded world We see patterns of violence and abuse that treat the earth and its people as expendable. We're warned that climate is at a breaking point, and it's easy to fall into despair, feeling as though turning the tide is beyond us. But caring for the earth is not just about policies. It's about a relationship and a spiritual practice. When we plant native species to support the birds, the bees, and the butterflies, we're practicing a spiritual kinship with nature. When we walk along the shoreline and breathe the salt air, it's a spiritual practice of kinship. Our work to care for the earth is like the bamboo's network of roots. When we advocate for renewable energy, roots are growing. When we choose organic practices to heal the soil, roots are growing. When we protect our habitats, roots are growing. We're not required to solve every global crisis, thank God. We need to trust the growth we cannot always see, and to nurture the connections that strengthen us beneath the surface. For when the roots are deep, they can withstand storms. Margaret Mead, who spent her life studying how cultures form and change, once observed that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. As a matter of fact, in her words, it's the only thing that ever has. I'd like to share with you the story about a Nobel Peace Prize winner named Wangari Maathai from Africa. She listened to the women of rural Kenya as they described to her that her crops were failing, the soil was eroding, and water was disappearing, and that this environmental crisis was for them a daily grind of exhaustion and hunger. And she told them to do one thing: plant trees. And as the trees took root, so did something else. The women began organizing. They earned income. They reclaimed the land. And very quickly, their work became political. For one cannot restore a system without addressing what's actively destroying it. So they wrote letters, organized protests, and they planted trees. Over time, their movement planted tens of millions of trees and reshaped the imagination of a country. And again, like Margaret Mead, Wangari said, "It's the little things that citizens do that will make all the difference." Now, planting a tree doesn't solve everything, but it does something real. It restores the soil, it holds water, it creates shade, and it becomes part of a larger system that supports life. So this is a little story to remember when we feel tired and overwhelmed, that change comes with small repeated acts carried out over time, perhaps work that no one can see as we build something that may not take fully shape in our lifetime, something with deep roots. It's easy to believe that what we do doesn't matter, that listening patiently to someone that you disagree with, or checking in on a neighbor who might be struggling, changing a light bulb, or planting native plants, or even calling and leaving a message with your local politician, that maybe these don't matter. But showing kindness and intention in small, ordinary ways, as simple as they are, give shape to the future. In closing, I'd like to share some things I discovered. I didn't wallpaper my dining room with them, but I have some things that I discovered as I was searching the internet about what's going on with our environment. And there's bad news, and there's good news. The Maine Sierra Club puts out a newspaper. This time it was titled March Badness, where they named the 64 worst climate actions taken by the present administration. You'll be relieved to know I'm not going to list all 64 of them, but I will name a few. There were rollbacks, like withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, revoking protections for offshore waters and coastlines, dismantling EPA's environmental justice, and slashing climate research. And there have been executive orders, like bulldozing the Big Bend National Park and overturning public land protections, blocking funding for clean energy, and firing wildfire fighters. And finally, corporate giveaways, like reopening the Arctic for oil and gas drilling and allowing logging in our national forests. But while all these are huge concerns that require our attention, I want to also share the fact that there is good news. There's record-breaking clean energy growth. Renewable energy has reached the tipping point where it is cheaper and more common than fossil fuels worldwide. In 2025, renewable energy, wind and solar, generated more electricity globally than coal did. And here in the United States, clean energy is expected to provide 99% of new power that is generated. That's all good news, folks. Small countries like Albania, Bhutan, Ethiopia, Iceland, Nepal, and Paraguay are nearly 100% powered by renewable energy. There are also good things happening with wildlife. Decades of protections are paying off with some species that were close to extinction. Green sea turtles, monarch butterflies, the North Atlantic right whale, and Indian tigers are all increasing in population. White rhinos and Scottish wildcats, who knew they were Scottish wildcats, have all been rewilded and are flourishing. New laws are holding governments and corporations accountable, especially as how they treat the world's oceans. The EU has voted to criminalize serious cases of ecosystem destruction. And here in the United States, several states have upheld that children have a right to a clean and healthful environment. The list goes on, and you may know some of these things already. There are cities who are cutting air pollution all around the globe. Single-use plastic bags and cutlery are forbidden in many places. And the Ocean Cleanup Project has removed 20,000 tons of plastic out of the Pacific Ocean. And just in case you're wondering, not all corporations are evil. I drive a Subaru, and they have planted 165,000 trees in cooperation with the Arbor Day Foundation. The detergent that I use is called Earth Breeze, and not only is it packaged in recyclable packages, but it doesn't pollute the soil. And the profits remove plastic from the ocean. And I'm sure there are many more that we could name. And so we have a choice. We can support those things that keep our world beautiful and safe. The recent NASA space mission, Artemis II, gave us remarkable insight into the wonder of this small planet that we share in the great infinite openness of space. We are together in this beautiful, fragile, unique place that's so full of possibility and life. Something magical happens in spring. Winter ends and something new begins. Brown leaves are pushed aside, Roger says by him, and new life emerges. With Easter, something magical happens. The stone is pushed aside and new life emerges. Doubts are pushed aside and faith is reborn. And when enough people do the work, something magical happens. Things begin to shift, slowly but surely. So the question for us is not, can we fix everything that's breaking? The question is whether we'll commit to the kind of work that restores what's possible. Whatever you are passionate about, whatever injustice gets your blood boiling, whether it's the treatment of the earth, air, water, and creatures, or immigrants, or those who are poor or displaced or in war-torn countries, or the cost of health care, the abuse of children, or our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, wherever your passion lies, show up, reach out in compassion, and speak up. Speak truth to power. Speak truth in love. For today's news, good or bad, is not the final word. We can imagine and create the world we aspire to, day by day, with small acts of kindness, justice, and humility. It's up to us. In this moment, it's up to us. Tikkun olam. Who can scale the world? We can. Send us. Amen.